Okay, welcome back to a podcast about names and other stuff. This is the second special episode. I think that's what I'm calling it. I don't know. My life is a mess. But this is the second time we're sitting down with my friend Troy. And I promise you right now, we've been texting back and forth today, so I can verify that despite what he threatens in this episode, he is not seeking legal action against me for having the audacity to call him a friend. Honestly, actually, if you didn't listen to the last episode with Troy, I ask you, please go back and listen to that a few weeks back, a little more than a month back now, because he's an interesting human being. A truly singular, unique man. And today in this episode, you're going to hear about his time abroad, about his work literally helping to build governments and create spaces in whole new countries, about how he walks in spaces that you normally don't find people like him. Even we're going to hear him expound more on what you could almost call his life statement, this idea of recognizing the vastness of humanity, the vastness of this world. And so it's my pleasure to sit down again with my friend Troy, and to share him with you all, share him with the world. This is good stuff. So hope you enjoy. I hope that this is engaging for you. And again, the whole point of this is that as you listen, as you hear these stories, these names, these individuals, my hope, my prayer is that it will help you to see yourself, to understand yourself, to see the beauty that you yourself possess, but also to see the beauty that those around you possess. Human beings are so amazing. And it's my hope that in this podcast, you can see just how amazing they are. All right, so we're recording again, and everybody missed the wonderful lecture you gave me about this new invention. You said it was called journalism?
Yeah. You should look it up. Journalism.
This new technique of questioning people and
having questions prepared, and I'm just saying, give it a go.
No, my goal is to look, Troy. I whether you see me as one or not, I see you as a friend of mine. So
you take that back.
I'm being honest. I describe you as
my friend. I did not come here to be slandered.
I describe you as my friend.
Don't go around telling people that.
Too late. I already do.
Oh my God.
But to me, that's what this is about. Is I sit down with some of my friends who are amazing, interesting people, and I want other people to see how awesome people are. Like we talked about this a little bit in the last episode. The
people
world's
are
divided,
fascinating.
and
people are fascinating.
Yeah.
If you listen to them, and they've got a story to tell. If you listen and give them that space to just be themselves, their authentic selves, and just tell you who they are, and let them feel safe in that space, and just talk. Don't challenge them. Don't challenge them. Don't contradict them. Don't overtalk them. Listen. That right there would change this whole spectrum of this country and this world. Just sit and listen to somebody.
Yeah. Well, that's what this is. And that's why it's conversation.
And there can't be, it's just absolutely fundamentally impossible to tell me there's a person that is 100%, 180 degrees different from you on absolutely everything. I don't accept that at all. If you listen and give them a chance, you'd find that you agree with each other on many, many things.
Yeah.
And if it's important to you to have people you agree with, I don't have to have myself surrounded by people that agree with me on every cultural thing and so forth. I mean, Now, if you got a certain job to do, or let's say you're a church or something like that, you've got to have some basics that, here's a platform, we start from there. But just in your life, socially and culturally, you don't have to surround yourself with people you agree with on everything.
I agree with you on that.
There you go. You're trying to be clever. You keep
try.
at it.
I'm not very good. Maybe one day I'll figure it out.
But no, I've had some of my closest friends, politically speaking, we were never always on the same page. And what's that got to do with anything? Even my own family members, we were never politically all on the same page. And that's okay. I mean, we can differ. I mean, it gets weird if you tell me there are people you agree with 100% on absolutely everything. How is that possible?
You mentioned family. So, all right, let's talk about family titles you carry. So you are a son because somebody gave birth to you. Um, that's reality.
You sure?
I'm sure. So you're a son, you're a brother, right? How many siblings do you have?
I have 4 sisters and a brother.
4 sisters and a brother. And are they all still alive?
But yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's a
No,
that's a
no.
that's a
I
that's a
had a
relevant thing. Yeah.
brother that passed away. Actually, my brother Bruce, when I was 12, he was in the military. He was in Turkey and the Black Sea. Very, very strong swimmer. And there was some of his guys he was in the military, drowning. He went out in the Black Sea and got one, and then went out to get the other. And the current in that sea pulled him. And it's interesting we're discussing that because that soldier reached out to our family. First, they called me this year.
Wow.
And when I came back to the office, there was a message from a lady in Washington State. And I looked at it and I thought, this makes no sense. I don't know her, or what am I calling her about? And she was telling me that she was sort of a representative, a family friend of that soldier. He was, to this day, this has been so many years ago, suffering from PTSD and so forth. And they wanted to come to the Kentucky area, him and his wife and some family, and meet our family and so forth.
Wow.
And I was a little hesitant at first because in this day and age, I'm just not going to talk to a total stranger about my family.
Yeah.
And my brother, before he passed away, he was married. And he had a young daughter, my niece, and she's got a son. And this lady was she wasn't a detective, but she did a lot of research. And she was asking me about my niece and my niece's son, my great nephew. And I'm not going to discuss that. I call him a baby. To me, he's 5. I'm not going to discuss the baby with her, a total stranger, over the phone.
Yeah.
I thought, no, you're entering in some territory you don't want to go
Yeah.
with me. But after a while of talking to them and researching them ourselves, and then I emailed all the family members and told them, and they wanted to meet them.
Yeah.
So actually, about a month or so ago, that couple came to Kentucky and they met with my family members.
Okay.
Did not meet with me because they're on the other side of the state. And when they were emailing me going, well, we know you're on the other side. And I said, where'd you land? And she said, Nashville. I said, oh, for God's sake, you drove right by me.
Yeah. Yeah.
On your way there. But it was really more, we learned a lot more about that day. My brother passed away. But it was really more for that soldier.
Yeah.
He was having, and it's like, you didn't let us down.
Yeah.
And it's okay that you're okay. And
Yeah.
if we can do anything to put you at peace, we're all good.
Yeah.
It's all great. My brother's daughter grew up to be valedictorian, a classical pianist, had school all across America looking from her, from Harvard and Yale, was a Kentucky Governor Scholar. She is what do you people like CSI?
Okay. Yeah.
Forensic scientist.
Yeah.
And her son, unfortunately, her husband passed away a few years ago, extremely young, in his 30s. So she's raising my great nephew by herself, but we're with her. And he's extremely intelligent. I mean, it's nice to have children ask you for books.
Yeah.
And he has an unlimited book budget as long as I'm working.
Okay.
He has an unlimited book budget. I do, and I've mentioned that to her. Yeah, we need to get him in a library. For the love of God, I'm on the library board. Get him a library card.
I was going to ask you. So, what does the title uncle mean to you? But I think you just told us. Like you obviously are an uncle.
It'd be more
and it's something
interesting to
important.
ask my nieces and nephews. I got 17 of them, and I'm curious. I think what they think of me. I don't know if I could handle it, but I know what I want for them, to be their true, authentic selves, to just be the best they can be. I want them to be absolutely free.
Okay.
I am such a believer. There are a lot of people talk about freedom, but I don't know how they really feel about it. I truly want to be intellectually, morally, spiritually, physically free, and just be the absolute best they can be. And whatever you want to do, if they want to be surgeons, or if you tell me I want to start a grass cutting company, great.
Yeah.
Be the best at it. And I want them to find themselves and hear lots of voices, truly, and the importance of putting the arts and culture in your lives, so they can be completely conscious. And it's so important. Years ago, I had a couple of friends that just constantly talked to me about consciousness. And I'm going to be blunt here. I would roll my eyes, and I always thought that's so space age and new age. And it's just, but it isn't. Once you start reading and thinking and studying, just being completely aware of who you are, where you are in that space, and your role in this universe, those kind of people are so great to be around and have in your life. And I want them to be completely conscious of who they are, what's their purpose, to be, particularly my nephews, to be men of single purpose.
Okay.
And I'm drawn to confident people. I'm drawn to people who live extremely, as Socrates spoke at his trial, about the examined life. And he talked about the unexamined life is not worth living,
Yeah.
said the man on trial. But it
He
is
examined
true.
his life to the death.
It is true. You have to have an examined life. Now, let's be careful. I'm not saying live inside your head. I'm not saying overthink everything to death.
Yeah.
I'm not. You got to go out there and live and make some mistakes and trip and fall. But just be conscious of what you're doing and understand, yeah, I made a mistake. Don't blame other people for it. Take it, own it, and say, I was trying. I am the best I can be right now. And say that and mean it. And if you live, good Lord gives you 10 more years, and you look back and go, look at Troy 10 years ago. I say, he did his best.
Yeah.
And he's a different person now. And I want them to be whole people.
Now, something you said about what you want for your nieces and nephews, about being the best and thinking about what other people,
Best they can be.
yeah, being the best they can be. And then thinking about like how I know some people sometimes perceive you in the world and how you live your life and do things. I get the opinion that oftentimes people view you as a perfectionist, that it's got to be perfect. Would you say you're a perfectionist?
Good Lord. Then I've failed because I don't know where I'm perfect at anything.
Yeah.
And I'm okay now with that. I was a bit uptight, I'd say, in graduate school and all that. In graduate school, I was graduate student body president. I was studying political science, urban, state, and local government. I studied cities, and there was a state legislative internship. I had to get that too. I was the TA to the professors, which is how I paid the tuition. We started a newspaper. I was doing that, and it was around the clock. I was at the door at 6 a.m., coming in about 10 or so, and grabbed what little sleep. And near the end of graduate school, I just started experiencing real anxiety. And I talked to someone at the campus, and he said, you know what it is? You're going to graduate in a few months. And I said, okay. And he said, all of this ends.
Oh, wow.
And then you don't know who Troy is after that graduation. And the moment he said it was like, click.
Yeah.
When you hear truth, I don't care if you want to accept it or not. When you hear it and it hits you, you know it's true. And what he said was absolute truth. Once you walk off this campus, who are you?
Yeah.
Had no clue. And that opportunity to move to Asia came, and I think that's the number one reason I took it. It's like, what else is going on? So let's take it. You wanted to live overseas, you wanted to see the world, and here's a gift being handed to you. And so I jumped on it.
Yeah. Speaking of Asia, okay, so you lived between Asia and Africa. How many years did you live outside the States?
I lived several years in South Korea, and I got to use that as a launching pad to go and travel as much of Asia as I could, and some of Africa and Europe. 3.5 so
All right.
there. And then years later, I would move to Africa, working with international NGOs, national non-governmental organizations, Democracy International, International Republican Institute, and so forth. And that was doing governance work.
Yeah.
And we did it. We were in more than 100 countries. I was in primarily South Sudan. But when I went there, it wasn't South Sudan, it was Sudan. The Sudan. The Sudan was the largest country in Africa, geographically speaking. And it was split in the northern part between Arab Muslims, and in the black part, in the southern part, I mean, there's no other way to say it, was black Christians.
Yeah.
And it was geographically cut with the help of the United States government in half. and those black Christians have now what is called South Sudan, and the original part is now just the Sudan.
Okay.
The U.S., in my opinion, helped South Sudan grab those oil wells on the way out the door. If you
We got to
look at
give them something. You
if
got to
you
give them
look at
something to
that
live off of,
line,
right?
that line didn't go straight across. It went bump. Then those oil wells were grabbed too, but it split the nation. And so I was working. When I arrived, I was in the Sudan. Then within a year, it became the South Sudan.
All right. And how long were you there total?
On and off, several years. When the company I worked for originally had me there, then they would send me sometimes to Kenya. Then they sent me to Zimbabwe, which probably out of all of it was the most fascinating for me. As I love South Sudan in the sense that the staff and the friends I made, I'm still in touch with them. They're struggling there. I mean, you'll notice online I say often there's a world elsewhere. They're struggling there. Zimbabwe, you go and you look, this used to be what they called the Pearl of Africa. And you can look at it. You can look at the grids of the city, the animals, the minerals, the culture, the high level literacy rate. Probably more anywhere in Africa, Zimbabwe has a high literacy rate. And I loved being there. I really did. We were working with the elections, trying to make them as fair and free. We were going up against the machine of General Mugabe, and he had wanted nothing to do with a fair and free election. To the day he died, he wanted nothing to do with him, and we were trying to be a thorn in his side. And I hope I was. I absolutely hope I was. What he was doing to that country and those people. I hope I was an absolute thorn in his side.
So
I worked there. I came home. They sent me back. They all then sent me to Nigeria.
Okay.
We were working there with political parties and doing governance work and free and fair elections. Had enough of it after about 8 months. And in West Africa, it felt more isolated than East and Southern Africa. Cast to come back home. And I came back home for a little while. And the next thing I know, then they sent me another company, said, we won the grant from USAID and the State Department. We need you to help go set this grant up. And I said, oh, yeah, where? And they said, well, South Sudan. I thought, well, here we go. And so I was right back in South Sudan on the Nile River. But I knew so many people, and I was able to help them get that program up really quickly, hired the team, and we accomplished a lot of things, a lot of trainings, built libraries in 10 states, which is all they had at that time. Trained things that you take for granted. We trained women in governance to have their own caucuses and have meetings. We trained governors to have what you would call a town hall meeting and to, you got to understand it's very tribal and very militarized. And when you're a former general, now you're a governor, and we're training you to have a town hall meeting in your state, and people can come and criticize you, and that governor's sitting there, you can see his fist tight and jaw clenching. And I know he's sitting there thinking, off with your head. And we're like, no. They get to speak their piece.
yeah.
And you're supposed to listen and take what they say and incorporate it into some policy, man. You can't go out there and punch them in the face. And we saw some, particularly I think it was Eastern Equatorial State of Baldessaro. I love that man. He was so progressive and so open, and he ended up winning awards here in America, and we brought him here for more training because he literally told his folks, come, speak your piece. Yeah. And you had to train them to speak their piece because here's a country so old and never has this been done where they can stand up and go, well, hey, General, instead of spending more money on all these big vehicles for you and now your posse here, we'd like some water, a well, a school, a hospital, a clinic or something. And they wanted basic things, just basic things. And you got to sit there and listen to them. And we were training them to do that. And I hope someday, it hasn't quite yet, it takes root.
Yeah.
So we're basically planting the seeds of governance.
See, so I was going to ask you about what it's like for you to be an expatriate.
And let me tell you something about that. Do you know where that came from? Particularly South Sudan. Strangely enough, it came from George W. Bush. His staff, the way the story was told to us from our president at that time of the International Republican Institute, that the consultants had told W, we're all over the world. We're spending billions of dollars. We don't have time. We do not have time for Sudan and where they want to go. And W said, why? Why? These Christians, these people are trying self-governance. And he said, no, don't abandon them. And we ended up getting probably one of the largest grants
Wow.
from the U.S. government in the world at that time. And so it's interesting when you go to a country like that, those black Christians, I'm never going to use the word worship. They truly revered W. Yeah. And I had a assistant who'd helped me with the political parties named Nelson in South Sudan. And when I would leave, I would always ask the staff, when I come back, what do you want me to pick up in the U.S. or wherever I'm going? And all of them, they wanted technology. They didn't want these fake products that were shipped in from China. They would all want some sort of technology. And he wanted George's, the president on our own first name basis. He wanted President Bush's book. I think it's called Decision Points.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And it's interesting how in that culture, that when I got off the plane, the driver they had picked me up. As soon as he picked me up and he's talking to me and he puts in a cassette tape. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a cassette tape. I'm thinking not even a CD or anything. He had a cassette tape and it was all country music. And that was very interesting. They were very, what you would say politically here, conservative, or Republican, and love country music. And those cassettes, I was going through Delhi. Delhi was the driver, and he did procurement for us. And he had a big box of cassette tapes, and he wanted more. And I said, well, I don't know where I get those in the U.S.
Goodwill.
I guess I didn't think of that. I just thought I don't know when I go back to the States where to find cassette tapes of country music.
Delhi, if you're listening, which would surprise me.
Adeli.
Oh, sorry, Adeli. I apologize for mispronouncing your name.
He can listen. If you put this online, he is a friend of mine and online, and we are Facebook friends, and I can tag him. So yes, Adeli, well, we're talking about you, brother.
And I was going to say, if you're listening, if you come to the States, I'll take you to a thrift store, and you can go through. There's so many cassette tapes all over the place, unless you don't want cassettes anymore. I don't know.
I should hope he's not still using cassette tapes.
My daughter loves them. Like it's a technology that's coming back.
Okay.
Because it's a physical media. You can hold it. You can touch it. There's this increased love for the tangible because we become so digital that we're losing tangible connection to things. And so people are actually loving cassettes now.
I interrupted your question.
No, that's okay. This is more about you than me because all I was going to say was that you it sounds like more than an expatriate, you really were like an architect of governments. It sounds almost insidious, but
we were practicing governance, good governance of, if you're going to use the U.S. government's tax dollars, we want you to use them for best practices. Yeah. We're not sitting there trying to line the pockets of some former generals and tribal, and they only give money to those that fall in line. Yeah. If we're bringing medicines there, we want them for the people. If we're trying to help with agriculture, we're trying to feed the whole country, not the ones that went from your tribe, which is essentially they've turned the tribe into a political party. And in South Sudan, it's called SPLM, the Sudan People's Liberation Movement, and they are the ruling party to this day. Okay. Now, I won't go in detail. You
told me no politics, and you.
Well, I mean, this international affairs, the State Department helped them. I mean, the State Department has these guidelines of when you're working overseas, what you can and can't do, and it's for all of us, regardless of the country. And I would sit down with them and go, "Well, now we cannot use U.S. taxpayers' dollars like that." And they go, "Why? You've done it before." And I go, "No, we haven't. They're the guideline." And they look at you and go, "I'm going to tell you something about your government. You did it before." And I go, "All right."
Well, we're not doing it anymore.
Exactly. And the SPLM, the U.S. government favored them back in the day. And they look up and go, "Where do you think this internet came from?" And you go, "Where did this come from?" Okay. But, that's way above my pay grade. I'm telling you, with this guidebook that I have from the U.S. State Department and USAID, this is what we're doing with American taxpayer dollars. Yeah. And this is, more importantly, what we're not doing.
So I have this my wife and I, Her name is Laura. My wife's name is Laura. See, I'm learning. I may not be a journalist by your definition or by mine, but at least I can
Or
learn.
by universities' standards.
But my wife and I were talking last night just about how people find us interesting. And I told her, I said, it always surprises me when people find me interesting because I know people who are so much more interesting than me. When I say things like that, I have people like you in mind, Troy, because you are a very interesting person who has gone through all these different places and done some different things. Like even now, you're talking about South Sudan and second President Bush's concern for the black Christians there. And I was like, wow, here's a guy who knows this and also went to New Orleans, the famous place where it was also said, George W. Bush don't care about black people. I mean, it was said. And it's like, and here's this one black man I know, this black hillbilly from Appalachia, who's in the middle of all of this, who can sit there and say, well, I can just tell you my experience.
And that's it. And I can tell you my experience working in New Orleans after the storm. And I'm not on W's propaganda team because there's a lot of things he did I absolutely don't agree with. But there's a lot of things he did from working in Africa in terms of the millions and millions of people who, let's just be blunt, have been protected from the AIDS virus because of the serums as they were brought over and the education and the medications and so forth. That was Bush on his way out the door. That level of funding they had not seen specifically for AIDS from any president. They didn't see it from Obama. I mean, yes, and I can tell you in New Orleans, again, I'm not on W's propaganda team, but I can tell you in New Orleans, if you worked in emergency management, and if someone's listening to this, you got to understand how we are in the U.S. When the president lands anywhere at any time, we close the airport. You do not have Air Force One landing with 50 other planes taking off and landing near it. That's just not the FAA does not allow that. Yeah. And if you're in New Orleans and the storm is hit and people are dying and we're trying to find you and people need food and water and medications, the last thing you need is the airport closed so the president can do some press op tour. Huh. And if you talk to the emergency management people on the ground, they did not want him there. It wasn't personal. It wasn't political. Most people in Louisiana are probably Republicans. It is, we don't have time for that right now, Mr. President. We don't have time. And if you read his book and listen to him, he'll tell you his staff was advising, don't do that. Yeah. And there was a photo of him looking at the airplane down at the storm, and everybody on his team, they took that photo because he wasn't allowed to land. And everybody on the team, his communications team said, don't release that. And there was the guy from Texas, Carl, I can't think of his name. He was the right hand of him. He said release it, and he now regrets it. Yeah. He said release it. And the president, you don't need that at that time. Yeah. You want the highways and the byways open, and they're all flowing. We're getting the people out, so both sides are flowing one direction. You go north. And then when the tanks start coming, when the U.S. military start coming, the National Guard, and all the aid, we need the highways. And if the airport's open, we need you flying in medicines or taking people out. We don't have time for the president. And anybody who's elected knows that at that time. So again, I'm not a partisan. Heck, I don't believe in political parties. I'm not in a party. I am registered non-politically affiliate. Most people think when you say that you're an independent, that's a party. I'm not in a party. But at that time, I would say they didn't want him on the ground. There was no time for that. Yeah. And he's got to live with that. He's tried to tell his story, but it falls on deaf ears. When you're working on the ground and you're focused on, we ended up finding about 2,000 dead bodies in New Orleans. But there were people still alive after that storm, hidden up in those attics and so forth. You don't have time for anything but search and rescue. That's the first phase of emergency management, search and rescue. Yeah. Then you go into a different phase and a different phase and a different phase. And then at the end, you go back into rebuilding. Yeah,
rebuilding and then mitigation.
And when you're in search and rescue, you don't have time to give tours for CNN and NPR and a president. Yeah. And I have to say, there are many things with W I didn't believe in, But I have to say, I thought, yeah, he got a bum rap on some of that.
He had a tough time in office.
What do you do with
The
a
stuff that came out.
storm like that you've never seen? I know people want to think that FEMA and everybody's absolutely ready, that we're ready. You know, we've heard for 50,000 years these fault lines that run through California, and there's going to be that big one someday. You keep telling yourself that we know exactly what to do when it hits.
Yeah,
I want
it's
to
called Get Ready to Die.
I want to tell you that we are, and I say we, the U.S. government and everyone is about as prepared as we can be. But you don't know if that big one ever hits California. You know, you do the best you can once it hits.
Or Kentucky with the New Madrid fault line.
And it's, you know, I would say, I don't know why I'm talking about this. Americans should be very thankful for FEMA, and they should be very thankful that we have systems and processes in place. When you have storms that hit California or New Orleans, you have ambulance services coming from nearly every community in America and states and towns that really can't afford to give over an ambulance and its personnel. They do.
Yeah.
And we do it here in Hopkinsville when, you know, we volunteered services when Eastern Kentucky had its recent flooding and all that. And we really, it's difficult to give over personnel staff. And God forbid, but if it happens or a tornado hit this town, you would see Bowling Green and Owensboro and Paducah and other communities giving up their sources. So that's the beauty of America. We have these systems and processes in place. And it's a shame that you sometimes only see us taking care of each other in disaster and being kind to each other.
Which brings me, Simon, hold on to this for now. This is my favorite quote of Troy. Like I write down quotes from people. And you actually have a box where I organize all of my quotes and I can find them. And this is in my collection of wise sayings.
That's terrifying.
In my collection of wise things on being human. That's why I decided to categorize it. I might move it over to beautiful sayings though too, because it's also beautiful. So this is what Troy says. Troy Body says, "I can do a small town. What I can't do is small people."
No, there's a world elsewhere, and the size of the town you live in doesn't really matter. It really doesn't. It's the size of the heart and the minds and the generosity of the people you live in. And you can go to New York City and go, oh dear God, you know, that there are people in this town only focused on themselves. And I've seen it. And I'll give you a perfect example. I have a friend that we're very close. He and I have the same last name, but he's a white man, I'm a black man. We don't believe there's any relation, but he's from this area. We met in college. He's now an Air Force pilot and all that. But he has a cousin here that works at a donut place here in this city. And what a lot of people may not know in this town is that donut place makes about 35,000 donuts a night. And they deliver them as far as Nashville and various other places. His nephew was delivering those donuts and had a horrific accident on the interstate down in Nashville and was laying there. His vehicle blew up and was on fire and was laying there, been hit. He's been on fire, and some people did stop to help. But my friend's nephew was able to see that there was a guy that stopped and literally took a photo on his camera phone.
What?
And left.
Wow.
That's horrifying.
Yeah.
So just because that guy lives in a bigger town like Nashville, he's not a bigger person. No. He's wretched. He's just absolutely wretched. So yeah, the size of the community doesn't matter. It's the size of their hearts and their vision and their compassion.
So you see why it's one of my favorite quotes of yours? Because it does sum up so much of you. Now, before we close.
Imagine taking a photo of somebody laying there literally on fire and then driving off.
I can, but that's because, so you talk about how you always, try and see, okay, how can we learn from the bad, from those communities and do better? I say I'm an optimistic realist. I try to be optimistic, but I also try to be very realistic of just the depravity of man. And a saying I used to hear in the church growing up from the old heads was, there but for the grace of God goes I. I try and simultaneously recognize just how messed up and twisted and wrong people are, but also realizing that, but I'm no better than them, and give me the right circumstances, I also might be just as wrong and twisted, as messed up as them. Not to be an apologist for that guy, but maybe he's, finally I was needing an extra $100 to get my mom her medication she needs, and let me go and turn this in real quick.
You believe that if it gives you any comfort to do so.
I'm not saying that's what comforts me is to simultaneously see the inherent just badness of people, but also the inherent badness of me, and how I need to be patient with myself and with them. You're the stoic. I'm the anarchist, Christian, socialist, whatever I am these days.
That's called a hot mess.
Yes, I am a hot mess. Look at my outfit.
I wasn't going to go there, but listen, you can't.
I try and wear all the colors
if
every
you
day.
believe in absolutely everything, do you believe in anything?
I do.
And we're not even going to go on this thing about the anarchy. There is nothing Christian about anarchy.
Oh, we could go on and on about this, Troy. I believe this is where it comes in. So this is what
I
I
believe.
I believe
in the study of true conservatism that my professors taught me, that government in its most basic form is divine.
Yes, but I also believe that the most conservative government would have been back Adam and Eve before there was any sin, and back then it was essentially anarchy. There was an absence of governments because it wasn't needed.
I don't call that anarchy. Anarchy against whom and what when you're the only two people on the planet.
I don't believe in an nonstop rebellion either. You don't have to be in rebellion all the time. No.
Okay.
Like you said, hot mess.
Yes. We agree there. You're a hot mess.
Every person I've interviewed for this podcast, I end with the exact same quote, okay? Because this is a quote that's important to me. So in high school, I was in the play The Crucible. I played John Proctor. And one of the speeches he gives, this is my favorite speech of his. And I'm ending with this because I think it really just brings everybody together. See, I do have one standard question. I'm almost a journalist. But this guy, this is the moment in the scene where John Proctor, he's at this point where he could be free if only he were to sign his name to a declaration that he doesn't believe. And this is his final protest. He says, "Because it is my name, because I cannot have another in my life, because I lie and sign myself to lies, because I am not worth the dust on the feet of them that hang. How may I live without my name? I've given you my soul. Leave me my name." So as we close out our time with you, Troy.
Sounds like Tina Turner. That's what she asked for in her divorce from Ike. She just wanted her name. That wasn't her real name.
My closing question for you, Troy, is that at the end of the day, what is it that the name Troy, that you, Troy Body, Troy, as the man that you are, what is that name? If you can't give anything else up, what does that name mean?
If you look on my LinkedIn page, I describe myself as this global public servant, and it is all I have done. There are other careers in hindsight I've dreamed about and wish I had taken, but I have been in service of people locally, nationally, internationally, and that's how I'm going to end it, in service of the public. I do believe in the Republic. I do believe in the goodness of people, and when I tell you that I want my nieces and nephews to be as free as possible and be the best it can be, I also want that for you and your nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
I want it for everybody. I want that freedom of, if you like knitting and drinking a cup of coffee and going to the library and checking out books, I want you to live in a community that allows you to do that. Or if you want to be a painter, if you want to do construction or be in medicine, that you can be the best you can be mentally, physically, and spiritually, and live. God, I hope people live in peace.
Yeah. I will say thank you again, Troy, for sitting down with me, and especially with my mistake last time around. You guys missed the best one. Like, this is just trash compared to
Oh, wow.
the first time.
Wow.
I blame me, though, because I got in the way too much this time.
Isn't trash.
But also, just thank you for being my, even though it offends you that I say this publicly, but thank you for being my friend, even if only in my own eyes.
You will hear from my attorney.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any institution, organization, or corporation. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only. All persons who participated did so of their own free will and speak for themselves only, regardless of any personal affiliations they may possess. This podcast has been a production of Salt.Light.Love Ministries. All rights reserved.